Hi, it's Nicole, and today I have a card showcasing the Whimsy Stamps Baby Animals Stamps and Dies. I just love the little baby animals from this stamp set. They're a great, nice, fairly large size, perfect for coloring with any kind of medium that you want to use. And I decided to do a little no-line coloring today, watercoloring with some distress markers. Now to start, I'm stamping my image with antique linen ink. I want something that's going to blend into the background so that you don't see that harsh line once I've watercolored. Then I have colored on some distress inks onto an acrylic block to kind of use as my ink palette. Originally I started with the antique linen distress ink and kind of found that I didn't particularly love that color for the base color of my giraffe. So I'm going to switch over to scattered straw distress ink, kind of blending the two together rather than, I guess, replacing it. That's one of the great things about this kind of look. It's almost imperfect, so you don't have to worry too much about starting over or anything like that. You might just want to make sure that the paper has completely dried or hit it with your heat tool before you move on to the next color, so that the watercolor cardstock doesn't pill. For my little dots on the giraffe, they are all colored with gathered twigs distress marker. You could also use the distress inks. If you don't have distress markers, press them onto an acrylic block, pick up the colors with a damp paintbrush, and you're going to get really similar results. For the hooves on my giraffe, I kind of started with the gathered twigs, but I'm going to go ahead and kind of color those in with a little ground Espresso distress marker. It's going to give a little bit darker brown look to that area, so there's a little more contrast between the hooves and then the spots on the giraffe. I am working in small areas and then just kind of working my way up, adding a little detail with gathered twigs, distress marker or distress ink to the legs so that they stand out a bit from the body. I'll go ahead and start working on the face of the giraffe. With the no-line coloring, it does generally color or cover up the eyes or any of those facial features, so you kind of want to be aware of that as you're coloring, or keep that in mind because you're going to need to draw those back in or add some color back into there to really make the animals or critters show up. I went ahead and added a little gathered twigs for the eyebrows. You could definitely also color those in with a marker if you wanted to, or use the fine tip on your distress markers to draw those back in, if you're not as comfortable doing that with a paintbrush. I used a little spun sugar or watered down picked raspberry for the cheeks as well as the insides of the ears. If you get a little bit too harsh of a line like I did here with my gathered twigs around the face, you can always water that down a little bit by simply picking up a little more water and adding and blending that in. I am going to draw a little bit of a gathered twigs line around my critter just to really make him pop. I felt like it needed just a slight outline. Adding a little bit darker there for the horns as well. And you can always blend anything out that you need to. Now once it's dry, I did go in with a black glaze pen and add the nostrils and the eyes, and I'm going to completely let that dry before I add the white highlights to the eyes. I've stamped my panda bear with the antique linen distress ink as well, and then I'm going to start coloring in this adorable little panda with my distress marker colors. I laid down black soot, hickory smoke, and pumice stone. Ended up mostly just using the black soot and pumice stone. I may have blended in a little hickory smoke here and there simply because it was on my block, and as I picked up my ink color with my wet paintbrush, but not a ton. And I guess I probably, instead of calling it a wet paintbrush, it's more of a damp paintbrush. I find for me, I get a lot more control the less water I use. So I don't end up with water kind of going, or color going everywhere all over my project. That was always a mistake that I made in the past, is I tried to pick up my color with a paintbrush that was just sopping wet. And what happens is that color kind of pools and then will kind of migrate outside of the lines, and you maybe don't get the look that you're going for. So for this kind of project especially, I want there to be some definite definition. I want to be able to see the critter. I don't want to see my watercolor, running all over the place. Sometimes that look is what you're going for. Florals or flowers would be a really good example of that's kind of a more artistic type of look, and it can be very beautiful. For this card, I definitely didn't want that. So a damp paintbrush helps give you more control rather than a wet paintbrush. I love seeing these little animals come to life as you gradually apply more color. One of the great things about these distress inks is once you lay down that initial color, kind of let it dry a little bit once you've blended it out or anything like that. You can always go back in and add more color. I'm going back into the face now and adding very watered down pumice stone to the quote unquote white areas of my panda. I also added black glaze pen for the eyes and nose there and the eyebrows. Painted in a little bit more definition to the nose area, adding those white highlights to my giraffe's eyes and to the panda bear's eyes once the black ink has dried. Then I'll go ahead and move on. The white areas of the panda, again, not pure white. I wanted it to be light enough that it gives the illusion of white, not so dark that it definitely doesn't look white anymore, but the addition of the watered down pumice stone kind of gives that white next to the black soot, if that makes sense. So it definitely helps build up the shape of the bear. Color in the legs with my black soot distress marker again. If you pick up more color with less water, you're going to get that darker black. If it's a little bit more watered down, you'll get a little bit lighter color like you see here. I'm definitely using much less water on my paintbrush as I go around the pads of his paws so that I can color in all those areas with a little spun sugar or watered down picked raspberry ink. Color in that next leg and go around the little pads of his paws there. Sorry, I got my head in the way. I was getting close. Sometimes the antique linen line that you stamped with it originally can be a little hard to see, so I get closer and closer as I am painting the color on. Going to grab a little bit more pink now for the paws themselves. Clean my brush off just a little bit before I pick up my color. And then go back in. And I did decide I thought he needed a little more definition around the head, so I went in with a little pumice stone, watered down, kind of taking a little bit of a damp paintbrush around that line because it might have been a tad too harsh, and blending it out just a little bit so that it's not quite the harsh line, but you still get the definition of the shape. The spun sugar for the cheeks adds a little pop of color, blend out there along the body again. And the legs, now that they're dry. Again, you want to make sure that when you go back over and add more color, that you let the paper either dry or you hit it with a heat tool so that you don't get that pilling by adding water upon water upon water on the watercolor cardstock. Once I have these little images all colored the way I want, I am going to stamp a balloon from a stamp set that was released last month from Whimsy Stamps. Again, stamp it with my antique linen distress ink, and then I'm going to color in the balloon with picked raspberry distress marker and a damp paintbrush. Now, the great thing about this card design, with just a couple of different color choices, maybe make the balloon blue or yellow, green, something like that, and change the color that you end up, that I'm going to color the greeting and the background color of the card. All of the same steps that I did with the giraffe and the panda, you can do everything the same and make a boy baby greeting card instead of the girl greeting card that I created. I love that. These animals work for either occasion or both genders, plus they could be used for tons of other card designs, not just baby cards. I'm going to use all the coordinating dies, line up all of these, use a little post-it tape to hold them down in place, and then I'm going to run these through the Big Shot die cutting machine. So I'll kind of move everything out of the way, pull my die cutting machine in here, and I'm going to do a lot of die cutting here all at once. When I get to the die cut portion of my card making, I generally like to try to do as much of it or most of it or all of it, if possible, at one time. That way I can do all my die cutting and move everything out of the way. Now, I die cut these, and then obviously I'm going to need to die cut a little bit more. I'm going to be using the hand stitched rectangles, also from the March Whimsy Stamps release. I love these. I'm such a huge fan of stitched rectangles, and the great thing about these hand stitched rectangles, it's that imperfect kind of curvy line, which I think is awesome. It looks really organic and much more realistic, I think, than the perfect stitched rectangles. Definitely not dissing the perfect stitched rectangles, because I use those all the time too, but I think stitched rectangles or stitched ovals or squares or circles are just a staple product for any card maker. They're so wonderful. Now, I had a scrap of fun foam that already had Stick It on both sides. It was from another project. I purposely kept that little piece because it already had the Stick It in place, which makes it a sticker on both sides. And I die cut the word baby from watercolor cardstock and that Stick It fun foam. It's going to give me a raised greeting for my card. The baby die is from the Baby Animals die collection that coordinates with these Baby Animals stamps and dies. On my rectangle, I am using the grass images and stamping them with the Mowed Lawn Distress ink. I just colored on my stamps with the marker. You could also use the ink pad if you wanted to. Stamped them on my rectangle, and then I'm kind of pulling that color out with a paintbrush that's been dipped in water. So there's kind of what it's all going to look like. I'm going to have my fun foam greeting plus a little bit of a stamped word that coordinates with the fun foam greeting to kind of finish that off. So now that I have a good idea of what it's all going to look like, I'm going to apply a little tumbled glass or salty ocean distress ink to the background, kind of a really light color wash to give a blue sky effect. And then I'm going to apply spun sugar and picked raspberry distress inks to my watercolor die cut word baby. Lighter on the top with spun sugar, darker on the bottom with picked raspberry. Again, switch up those colors with some great blues, and this could be a boy card very, very simply. Or maybe you don't do pink, do yellow, do orange, green, all kinds of great colors. I went pretty traditional with my pink. Then I'm going to attach that inked die cut word to my fun foam word for a dimensional greeting. I'm going to ink up the word welcome and stamp that kind of near the top. You can see I've laid everything out so I can make sure I know exactly where I want to stamp that word. And then I'm going to stamp that in that upper right corner. I decided after I had everything laid out that I needed some of those hearts from the Baby Animals stamp set. There's 3 different sizes, little outlines. I'm going to ink those up with picked raspberry distress ink, stamp them on my watercolor cardstock, do a little first and second generation stamping with my outline. So Some of the hearts are going to be darker, some will be lighter. Tried out something else there that didn't really work. So there you can see the first and second generation stamping. Then I'm going to simply kind of pull that color out with a damp paintbrush from that stamped line to color in all the hearts. Once they're dry, I'll die cut those with the Coordinating Baby Animals Hearts dies. Then it's simply a matter of putting everything together. I'm going to attach my animals there sitting in the grass, and I want to layer them so that they're kind of one in front of the other and really kind of tucked together, super cute. Trying to figure out the best. They need to be moved over a little bit. Where the animals lie flat with the rectangle, the dimensional word needs to be over top, but I don't want it to be too much over top the panda bear. I'll attach my balloon and finish by adding the hearts using some Zot's Bling glue dots. They're nice small glue dots that work great for small die cut pieces, sequins, anything little that you have to attach to your cards. Last thing I'm going to do is take this panel, secure it to a pink card base using a nice strong adhesive, and that is going to finish up this baby card design. Thanks for watching this video showcasing the Whimsy Stamps Baby Animals Stamps and Dies. The supplies I've used to create this card are listed and linked below the video on YouTube. Here are a couple more Whimsy Stamps cards that you might be interested in. Please subscribe for weekly card making and stamping videos. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.